Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome as we discuss the Batman's Rotten Tomatoes score, which is fluctuating from 80 to around 89%. And when I woke up this morning, I think it was about 80% according to someone on Twitter. I just checked on the site now. Don't forget, this is a pre-recorded video because we will be doing this on a premiere, which I will be there to answer anything or reply to your comments as usual. But at this moment, it's 89%. Now, that's a really good, excellent Rotten Tomatoes score. It's verified, fresh right now. And the problem with Rotten Tomatoes, it's like a yo-yo. It can go up and down and things like that. So it'll be interesting where this finishes on by the time it's released on March the 3rd. Here in Cyprus, the Batman is released on March the 3rd, hoping to go back to see it yet again. And I think in some territories, it's March the 4th. But why is the Batman around 80 to 89, 90%? And I mean, I think Peacemaker, after its run, is still at 95%. It might be a streaming show, but it's made like a movie, right? Different thing, DC. It's interesting, isn't it? And then you look at the kind of films like Spider-Man No Way Home, who have a huge score, right? Both anticipated movies, Spider-Man No Way Home and the Batman. But why? Why is this? Some of the things that critics didn't like about the Batman, and let's be clear, most critics loved the Batman, gave it 4 or 5 stars. There were some great reviews. We covered the reviews and the reactions here on Movies TV Mad on a live video last night. You are welcome, of course. But it's an interesting conversation to have, isn't it? Why? Because I don't believe this mainstream audience will ever accept dark CBMs. And you can argue about The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is like a playground Disney, Disneyland ride compared to the Batman. The Batman is an extremely dark, horrific movie in all the good ways. But you compare it to The Dark Knight, even though it has, some very dark themes, I don't think it's as dark at the end of the day. Now, The Dark Knight has some horrific images. Harvey Two-Face is Two Faces when you see them and you see the one that's scarred. It's horrific. It's horror movie type. It looks sensational. The prosthetics are amazing. So that is horrifying. There are horrifying elements to that film. But the Batman has more significant horrifying elements to it. So if you're saying to me, why? What's the difference? Another difference to the reaction to the Batman at the time, or should I say The Dark Knight, is that was Iron Man out in 2000? Yeah, there was an MCU, and I'm not sure when The Dark Knight was released if we had the first Avengers out yet. I can't remember. But whether or not the MCU just came out or wasn't out yet, it wasn't about, the MCU is the best thing ever. The MCU have consumer confidence. DC hasn't. But that shouldn't have affected the Batman. And we'll talk about the box office later on. Maybe I'll do another video, or maybe we'll discuss it here. One of the two things, because I'm going to make multiple videos today before I go live tonight. But it's interesting. I don't think this mainstream audience, will ever accept dark CBMs. We saw the shit that Snyder got. And let's be clear here. Man of Steel, in my book, a great movie. Low Rotten Tomatoes score, much lower than the Batman will ever be. Batman versus Superman, again, for me, a brilliant film. That score is ridiculous, right? And the Snyder Cut did quite well in Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know, where it is now. And I don't, even though for me the most important opinion is yours, the audience's, I still really don't focus on the audience scores. I focus on the critics' scores. So I think it's interesting. And critics will always somewhat go against the movie they feel is too long and too dark, especially in the comic book movie realm. So most of them liked it. But there was this repeated kind of thing, there's no fun, it's really dark, and, it's too long. Some critics felt it was too long. Do I feel the Batman is too long? No. You don't even feel its length. And as I said on my live yesterday, they absolutely wet themselves with orgasms and excitement when they saw that Endgame was going to be 3 hours. A film that didn't need to be 3 hours and just did it for the hype train, right? Bored the audience for 2 hours, although that audience would never admit that, right? The only relevance or entertainment of Avengers Endgame is the final act. Some of the critics also didn't like the third act. Now that's interesting to me, and you'll be a better judge than that than the critics. As I've always said about critics, they look for different things in movies than the audience do. But it's interesting how they all went in there and they gave No Way Home, glowing reviews and, the highest score possible. Where the Batman is around 80 to 89%, 91% sometimes. And I just think it's interesting. You've got a film that's got to be the most accurate adaptation depiction of Gotham City and Batman and his characters in his universe, and you hear things like it's too long. The Batman doesn't even feel long. It doesn't. But some of these people don't have the concentration to sit there. So this kind of will lend very nicely to the discussion about the box office. The box office projections a few weeks ago were near 200 million domestic. Now they've gone down to 100 million, 125 million. That's not just very disappointing, that's very interesting when these projections come in just after the reviews and the Rotten Tomatoes scores. That's interesting to me because people do go on Rotten Tomatoes to make their minds up. And I'm talking about the mainstream. Now, a lot of people are fed up of me and other YouTubers and, bloggers talking about Rotten Tomatoes, but people go there. I don't like Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's a terrible thing. I hate the fact that we've got an aggregate score line for films. It's not fair, especially for the smaller independent movies that are really struggling in this industry right now. People tell me, support Matt Reeves, support Zack Snyder. Well, I love those guys and I love to support them, but I'd rather give my support to struggling independent directors, considering I'm a struggling independent director. But it's not a self-serving thing. They're the people who truly need your support right now. Matt Reeves doesn't really need your support. He'll be okay, as will Zack Snyder. A Rebel Moon video is coming later on. But it just tells you what era of film we're in when a compelling piece of art is put out, like the Batman. You see a film like Dune that did okay, quite well in the box office and with reviews, but didn't do as well as Spider-Man No Way Home. That tells you where we are right now. That Peacemaker has a higher aggregate review critic score still, after it's all been said and done, than the Batman has right now. I think that the Suicide Squad at first was about 100% for a little bit as well. The Suicide Squad's still doing really well after, not even a year after its release. But that film was very popular. Not in cinemas, but it did well on HBO Max and the critics loved it. So what is it about this film they don't like? What's the difference between this film and The Dark Knight? And I think I'll do another video where we kind of talk about the obsession with The Dark Knight, because I think that's an interesting one. Quite simply, everyone, this film was liked by most critics. This film will do good money. I'm starting to doubt that this film will make $1 billion, but I think it will do okay. Whatever happens, there'll be more of these. But I think this is a good experiment. And to have it on another Earth, separate from the DCEU, does the DCEU a big favour. Everyone talks about the favour it does Matt Reeves, because it shows WB what people want and they don't want. And I'm not talking about the film's length. I'm talking about tone and Batman, because the tone of Michael Keaton's Batman we're getting in the DCEU and Batgirl will be hugely, significantly different. So there's a lot to talk about today. There's a lot more videos to come. I wouldn't worry about critics. I wouldn't worry about the Rotten Tomatoes scores. I just did this video to explain to you the mentality in film today. They want fun. They want short movies. They want lightness. They don't want to be told they live in a shit world. And that is the crux of the matter. This is Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this perfection. And I'll see you again later for more videos. Until then, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.